Hey, fourth graders, it's Thursday, April 30th. This is lesson 9.7, and I'm going to do this whole lesson today. It's comparing decimals, so it's talking about using inequalities, greater than, less than, the little chompy sign things, those to help us see which one's bigger or smaller. So they're going to do it with models, they're going to do it with number lines, and they're just going to do it with numbers too. So I'm going to do this lesson with you. This is, like I said, for Thursday, April 30th. If you join me for Zoom today at 1:30, I will be doing the homework page with you, and that's page 537. I'll do that with you on Zoom. But for now, I'm on page 533, comparing decimals. All right, it says the city park covers about 0.64, so 0 and 64 hundredths square mile of about 0.18, which is 18 hundredths of the park is covered by water, and about 0.2 or 2/10 of the park is covered by paved walkways. Is more of the park covered by water or paved walkways? So it says cross out unnecessary information. They tell you how big the city park is, but that's not really necessary for this problem. They just want to know how much more of the park is water and how much of it is walkway and which one is bigger. So that information, this number is not necessary because it just is not something we need to consider right now. So circle the numbers that you will use. So I'm going to use these two numbers because I'm going to compare these two decimals to see which one's bigger. So I need to find which is bigger, water or walkway. Remember, walkway is like a sidewalk. So they show in the picture, here's the walkway and here's the water. So trying to figure out, is there more water or there more sidewalk? So the one way that you can do it is to use a model. So it's just shaded in 18 hundredths. So I'm going to do 10. That's 1/10. That's the 1. That's 10 of these guys. And then 8 hundredth boxes to represent the 8 of the 18. So that's that much. And this one is 2/10 because the 2 is in the tenths place. So I'm going to shade in 2/10. Now, just because these pieces in this one isn't the reason that this one's bigger. Okay? Just because these have bigger pieces doesn't mean that this is the bigger decimal. It happens to be the bigger decimal in this problem because more space is taken up, not because there's more bigger pieces. This one covers a whole stick, but then only 8 of another stick. This is 2 whole sticks. So this one is bigger because it covers up more area than this one does. Says another way you can do is to use a number line. Locate 18 hundredths and 2/10 on the number line. So 18 hundredths is a 1/10 with 8 hundredths. So here's 1/10. And then I'm going to go to the 8, which is this one right here. Okay. And that's this one, 0 and 18 hundredths. And this is 0 and 2/10, which is right here on this big line right here. Which means that this one is bigger because it's further down on the number line. So 0.18 or 0 and 18 tenths is closer to 0. So 18 tenths is less than 2/10. Or 18 hundredths, sorry, and 2/10. It says compare equal sized parts. So this one is, you can look at it as hundredths to hundredths. So since this is in tenths, it's kind of like the lesson we did yesterday. We were trying to add 2 fractions. One was in hundredths and one was in tenths. So we put both of them in 100ths to compare, to add a little easier. Same idea works for comparing. So with this one, this is 18 hundredths. 0.2 is 2/10, which is equivalent to 20 hundredths. Because again, if you look at the model, this is 2/10. So that would be like 10 little boxes fit in one of these guys. 10 boxes fit here. So this is 10 and 10. And this is just 18. So 18 hundredths is less than 20 hundredths, which means that the decimal is less than as well. So because this one It said that 18 was water. And the 0.2 was the walkway. So more of the park is covered in walkway because this one's bigger. So it says more of the park is covered by walkway. All right, turn the page. This one does it with money. So it kind of ties in some of the other stuff we've been learning this week. It says you can compare numbers written as decimals by using place value. Comparing decimals is like comparing whole numbers. Always compare the digits in the greatest place value first. So when you're looking at decimals, the tenths place is greater than the 100th place, which makes sense because a tenth is bigger than a 100th. So you always want to look starting from left to right and check it that way. It's just like if we had, like, for example, you don't have to write this down, but just to show you. Let's say we had 678 and 922. If I were to ask you which one was bigger, you'd be like, well, duh, Mrs. Spears, this one's bigger. But you're going to do that because you started with the hundreds place and notice, okay, this is only 600, this is 900, so this one has to be bigger, regardless of what the rest of the number is. With this, it works the same way. If your ones place is bigger, then it automatically makes that one the bigger one. But then if they're the same, you're going to go to the next place value. If they're the same, you go to the next place value all the way down until you find one that's bigger than the other. So this one says Tim has $0.5 or a $0.50 or 0.5 of a dollar. And Sienna has 0.05 of a dollar. Who has more money? So I'm going to shade in these models. So with Tim, they did it in tenths. This is 5/10. So I'm going to fill in 5 of these 10th size pieces. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so that's him. And Sienna has 5/100 of a dollar. I'm getting my words mixed up today, which means I'm going to fill in 5 boxes. Not 5 sticks, but 5 boxes. So by this, it's pretty easy to see that Tim has more money. But if you were to just compare him with the numbers, so Tim is going to go in this top one, and he has 5/10 of a dollar. So I'm going to put 0.5, and there's no hundredths written in his number, so I'm just going to write an X in that box. And then Sienna has 5/100, so I'm going to put 0.05. I start over here. They both have no whole numbers, so I can't use that to compare with. Go to the next place value. Well, Tim has 5/10 and Sienna has no tenths. So even though she's got an extra number on the side, with decimals, the further you go this way, the smaller your number is actually, the further out you go. So with this one, just because she's got it over here, that doesn't mean hers is bigger, just because it has more numbers in it. His is bigger because he has 10 or 5/10. She doesn't have any tenths. She just has a couple hundredths. So he is bigger because of that. So that means that 5/10 is greater than 0/10, which is right here. So 5/10 is greater than 5/100, which is weird to think that, you know, it sounds like tens and hundreds, but it's not. It's tenths and hundredths because we're talking about decimals. And a hundredth as a decimal is a lot smaller than a tenth as a decimal, which is a little bigger. So it says, compare the size of 1/10 to the size of 1/100, which is what we just talked about. How could this help you compare 5/10 and 5/100? And that's exactly what I just was explaining to you. You know, 1/10 is bigger than 1/100 because 1/10 is one of these and 1/100 is one of these little guys. So like I said with decimals, if we were to do the thousands place, which is like the next place value over, and you learn about that in 5th grade, these boxes would be even tinier. So with decimals, the further you go to the right, the smaller your number is, which makes sense. If you look at a regular whole number, this place value is bigger than this place value. The further down you go, the smaller your place value gets. And the same thing with decimals. The further you go, the smaller your place value. All right, compare 1 3/10 and 6/10. So shade the model to model 1 3/10. So I'm going to shade in one whole model because that's one whole and 3/10. So I'm going to shade in 3/10 next to it. So that's 1, 2, 3. Okay. And then I've got 6/10 over here. I'm not even going to shade in a whole model because I don't have a whole number. I just have 6/10. So I'm going to fill in 6/10 boxes. So there's 1/10 box, 2/10 boxes, 3/10 boxes, 4/10 boxes, 5/10 boxes, and 6/10 boxes. Well, this one clearly takes up more area than this one does because this one's one whole one plus some more. This one's just part of one. So that one is bigger. All right, I'm over on page 535 now. So it says compare 39 hundredths and 42 hundredths. Write less than, greater than, or equals, and shade the model to help. So here's 39 hundredths. So I'm going to fill in 3/10, which is the 30 part. So that's 10, 20, 30. And then 9 hundredths, because the 9's in the hundredths place. This one is 42 hundredths. So I'm going to do 40, so 10, 20, 30, 42. So this one is bigger. It takes up more space. It's got 4 whole sticks plus 2 blocks. This is only 3 whole sticks plus 9 blocks. So that one's smaller. So I'm going to show that that one is less than. I think this is probably the best way to compare decimals because this is how we compare regular whole numbers anyway. Plus, think about trying to draw these boxes every single time you want to compare a decimal. Like, you're going to pull all your hair out. So this is the best way, I think, to do it. Just compare them, stack them, and compare them. Just like we've done in the past when we were to compare whole numbers. We stacked them and we compared them one place value at a time. So with this one, I'm going to put in the 2 numbers. So I've got 0 and 26 hundredths. 0 and 23 hundredths, and I'm going to go from left to right. So I've got my ones place. They're both the same, so I have to move to the next one. The tenths place, they're both the same, so I got to move to the next one. I look at the hundredths place. This one has 6 hundredths. That one only has 3 hundredths. So that means that this one is bigger. Same thing, number 3. Stack them. So I've got 0 and 10, 7/10. No hundredths on that one, that's okay. 0 and 54 hundredths. So start at the left, work my way over. This one is, they are the same, so we're going to move to the next one. This one, 7/10 is bigger than 5/10, which means that this one is the bigger one, okay? Which means that we're going to show that that's greater than. Stack these ones. These ones have whole numbers with them, so make sure you put that in the ones place. So I have 1 and 15 hundredths. And then 1 and 3/10, nothing in that place. The ones are the same, so I'm going to move to the next one. 3/10 is bigger than 1/10, so this one makes it the bigger one. And we show that that's greater than. This one's a little tricky, so be careful with this one. Don't just jump straight to the decimals. Because like I said, this is why we have to start from left to right. So I'm going to write that number in, write this number in, and I start from left to right. Because if you start with the decimals, you're like, oh, that one's bigger. Actually, look, 4 holes is better than 2 holes. So that means that this one is bigger. And it shows it that way. If you were just looking at the decimals, it would be the opposite. So be careful with that. All right, I want you to pause the video. I want you to try these on your own. These ones are a little more difficult because they have a fraction and a decimal. But remember, it's way better to compare fraction to fraction or decimal to decimal, whichever you're more comfortable with. But you got to turn one or the other into the opposite one so that you can compare. So go ahead and pause your video. And here are your answers. So if you look at these side by side, the first place value is the ones, they're both zeros. The next place value is the tenths place. This one's a 9 and this one's an 8, which means that this one is bigger. This one has a 1 in the whole number place. This one has a 0 in the whole number place. Well, that one's bigger. This one has a 2 in the tenths place. Well, they both have 0 in the ones place, 2 in the tens place, 3 in the tenths place. This one's bigger. Oh, did you just hear my stomach growl? It's time for lunch. So then I've got 2 and 61/100ths and 3 and 29/100ths. The 2 and the 3 are in the ones place. The 3 is bigger. So that one is bigger like that. I went through all those and you're still like, wait, I didn't get those answers. Stack them. Okay? There's nothing wrong with stacking the answers. I didn't do that over here because it just didn't have as much space. I probably could have done it. But as long as you're going from left to right and you're looking at each place value at a time, that's what matters. Like I said, if you thought you did that and you did not get the same answer I did, stack them like this. That will make a lot more sense and that will help a lot more. So with these ones, I took most of these and turned them into decimals, because with these cases that it made it a little bit easier. So especially since this whole section is on comparing decimals, I turned all the fractions into decimals so I could practice that skill. So this is 3/10, which means this is the same thing as 0 and 3/10 in decimal form. So if I compared these two, I have 0, 31/100ths, 0 and 3/10. Same, technically the same because they're both 0, okay? Even though there's nothing there, it still means a 0. So these two are equal. Turn this guy into a decimal, so this would be 0 and 4/100ths compared to 0 and 2/10, sorry. 0's in the ones place, a 2 in the tens place, and a 0 in the ones or tens place. Sorry, I can't talk today. And so this one is bigger. Okay. So this one I've got, this is 0 and 1/10. So they both have a 0 in the ones place. They both have a 1 in the hundredths place. This guy doesn't have anything on the end, so that's like a 0. And this one has a 5, so that one makes this one bigger. This one was tricky, so be careful with this one because they didn't give you a fraction in tenths or hundredths, which is what you've been working with. So what I ended up doing was turning this guy into a fraction and then comparing that way. Because we're just now learning how to turn fractions into decimals and we've only been doing with tenths and hundredths. By doing it with eighths, it's a lot more tricky and you won't learn that until next year. So I just went with what I know. I turned stuff into what I know. So I turned this guy into a fraction. That would be 8 out of 10 because it's an 8 in the tenths place. Okay. And then with this, I couldn't do, it's not comparing to the right amount of decimals here, but or the right amount of fractions because they have different denominators. However, I know that 8/10 is closer to 1 whole than this is closer to 0, so I know that that one is smaller. If I were to compare those decimals, I could do like my butterflies, or those fractions. I keep talking the wrong thing today. Compare. This one's bigger for sure. Okay. All right, last one. Robert has $14.53 in his pocket. Ivan has $14.25 in his pocket. Matt had $14.40 in his pocket. Who had more money, Robert or Matt? And did Ivan have more money than either of them? So I'm going to compare Robert and Matt because it had who had more money, so him or him. So Robert had $14.53 compared to Matt, who had $14.40. Okay, and then I look. Okay, they both have a 1 in the tens place. They both have a 4 in the ones place. In the tenths place, after the decimal, this one has a 5 and this one has a 4, which means that this one's bigger. So this one was Robert and Matt. So Robert has the bigger one. Did Ivan have more money than either Robert or Matt? Well, Ivan had $14.25. That's smaller than both of these, so the answer to that one is no. So Robert has the biggest. And then Ivan has the least. Oops. All right, like I said, if you join me for Zoom today, that's the end of this video. If you join me for Zoom today, I'll do this next page with you. If not, just send me some messages if you have some questions. I will talk to you guys in your next video. Bye!